Hey everyone, today we're looking at perks that went from zero to hero. I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at perks throughout DBD history that were once bad but are now good, and in some cases even meta. Kind of as a mirror to the good perks that became bad video. Many of these are perks that were altered in the recent 6.1.0 perk update. We're going to cover 4 perks for each side. Let's get into it. Overcharge is the perk I want to start off with, as I think this perk has had a really big turnaround in power. Overcharge is one of those perks that was never quite bad enough to ever get the attention or a buff, but it was never good enough that it was ever used really, and it didn't have too much synergy. It was pretty much used within meme builds like impossible skill check builds. Originally it would activate after kicking a generator. The next survivor to touch the generator after the kick would get a difficult skill check, and if they missed, they'd lose 5% progress on the gen. It was okay, but having to kick all the time for only the possibility of a 5% progress loss just wasn't that worth it, particularly with experienced players, who would probably hit the skill check. Even less experienced ones would be able to clock it the first time, and the next time round be ready for it. It remained this way for around 5 years I believe, with no real change, until the recent 6.1.0 buff. The main change was the addition of a 200% regression added for 30 seconds after the kick, which is the same number as old Ruin. It was also 400% I believe in the PTB, which was even crazier. This means you can guarantee regression on the generator, and then potentially even more with the skill check. It was a good compromise and came at the right time, with Ruin being cycled out of the meta, which only solidified Overcharge's place higher up, allowing Overcharge to come closer to the top with similar regression perks like Cool of Brine. Off the record is a pretty clear case of a perk jumping from being debatably useless and quite niche to almost instantaneously meta within a single patch, which is kind of crazy. It was introduced in 3.6.0 and activated after being saved from the hook, and lasted 80 seconds. During this time your aura would be hidden from the killer, and your grunts of pain would be reduced by 100%. At the time it was like a worse Iron Will, merging the abilities of Distortion and Iron Will, and creating this odd niche in between. In 6.1.0 it got a big rework, activating for 80 seconds after unhooking still, but now blocking your aura, reducing grunts of pain by 100%, and granting the endurance status, which was the big change. This makes you able to take an extra hit, be silent, and block auras for 80 seconds. Which is kind of insane. It's now a prime anti-tunnel perk, but can also be used somewhat like the old version of DS, to mess with the killer, what with the 80-second duration of endurance, which is twice as long as DS. From a niche perk to a frustrating amalgamation of borrowed time and decisive strike, this perk is really strong now, and surprisingly just in a single patch, and really just with the addition of a couple lines of text. Somewhat weaker nowadays with the base kit borrowed time changes, but still great. And also since they removed its activation in the endgame. Deadman Switch is a clear case of a perk going from near useless to a core part in many of the strongest builds in just a few patches too. In its current state it activates for 30 seconds after hooking a survivor, blocking generators whenever a survivor lets go of one before it's fully repaired. If they do this, they're also revealed to you with a white aura if blocked. This is currently great for both locating survivors and for slowing gens, and is still great in its current state, despite being slightly nerfed from its peak. In the fairly recent patch 6.1.2, the duration was reduced to 30 seconds down from 45. Scourge Hook Pain Resonance is one of the biggest reasons for Deadman Switch becoming so strong, creating a combo where you can hook, force survivors off of gens, regress them, and block them all at once. Deadman Switch's original state was just kind of odd. To activate it you would need to hook the Obsession, where it would then activate for the next 45 seconds. Once active, if a survivor let go of a gen, it would block the gen. The main issue here was the Obsession part, which pretty much killed the perk, and meant it activated inconsistently, and often at undesirable times. So when the Obsession part of this was removed in 5.5.0, it was kind of a big deal. Again, one simple change and the addition of a great combo perk, and Deadman's became incredible. Windows of Opportunity is a case of a perk always being really good, but being held back by restrictive cooldowns. This is the case for a decent amount of perks that have the potential to be good, but just can't quite be because of either a cooldown at all or a cooldown that is far too long, like Oppression for example, with its 80-second cooldown. In its original 2.0.0 state, Windows would reveal the auras of pallets and vaults within 20 meters. However, and this was the big hit to its ability to be good, it had a 40-second cooldown if you vaulted or dropped a pallet during a chase, which kind of kills it at its most critical point. This was realized as an issue and reduced to a 20-second cooldown in 3.0.0. Finally, in 5.3.0, the cooldown was removed entirely, and the range was extended to 32 meters. This made it a genuinely good perk at all times, great for new players and also experienced ones, providing a layout of the trial and its resources at all times. This made it a top tier perk, from something that was otherwise horribly restrictive and average with the cooldown. Simple change, but a really meaningful one that did it a lot of good. Hex Blood Favour is a hex perk that actually got buffed instead of nerfed, which is kind of odd. It currently remains 2 in a buff state. This is another great case of a perk which only required a few changes for it to go from maybe one of the weakest hexes in the game and generally a waste of a perk slot to an incredibly oppressive perk that as a hex becomes a priority for survivors to break. Currently this perk blocks all pallets within 32 meters and for 15 seconds after you hit a survivor, disallowing the pallets to be pulled down. This triggers with a basic or special attack. Its original 4.2.0 release date had it instead at a small 16 meters after hit, and the perk also had a cooldown of 40 seconds. Furthermore, the effect only triggered on basic attacks. Currently when the effect triggers, it triggers from the survivor's location. The old version, however, triggered from you as the killer, which meant you'd instantly lose a couple meters. Often with old Blood Favour, you'd hit a survivor and they'd just use their speed boost to get to the next area where it wasn't blocked, as 16 meters was barely anything compared to the current 32. Overall, this is a clear case of just realizing that the way the perk has been designed is fundamentally flawed, and then fixing it. With the current version being a fair but powerful hex, they knocked it out the park with the changes on this one, solving all the issues in one update, and we love to see that. Boil Over was a perk I wanted to mention, with it briefly becoming meta, or very good at least. When this happened, it was a big surprise, because it's one of those perks I just never expected to ever be considered good, or even average to be honest. For the longest time, Boil Over had very weak effects, giving a 75% greater intensity to wiggling, making it harder for the killer to carry you as a survivor. Then it would also block hook auras within 14 meters when being carried. This was super average, with the wiggling intensity being quite easily controllable, and the aura block being a mildly useful ability. It's remained this way for about 3 years, until 5.5.0, where it got a considerable buff. This was a really interesting phenomenon, which came as a result of recent map design in a way, and often the placement of breakable walls. Wiggle intensity was bumped to 100%, hook aura blocks were extended to 16 meters, and finally the big addition was that whilst being carried, if the survivor dropped down from something, 25% of your wiggle would instantly fill. This was abused thoroughly, and caused many games on maps like RPD or Eyrie of Crows to be very hard to end, with survivors able to just down on the upper levels, and often not get hooked. It was especially viable with a Sabo build, where you could just break nearby hooks too. I wouldn't quite call this meta, because it wasn't really a consistently viable tactic, and a lot of the time just led to the killer slugging, but it was absolutely one that could work, especially if coordinated well. This was reworked quickly after in 5.5.2, changing the instant wiggle progress from fulls to instead give 33% of the current progress instead of a flat 25%, which didn't destroy the ability to use the larger buildings to your advantage, but certainly made it harder. Finally, in 5.7.0, the wiggle intensity was returned back to 80%. Overall, this perk is a super interesting case of something being awful, becoming annoyingly strong, and then being returned to being just okay. It's probably better this way though. Franklin's Demise may be a bit of a curveball, but it's a perk I think worth mentioning. A bit like Blood Favour, Franklin's Demise was already a great concept, it just needed some fine tuning to get it right. Now it's really annoying, but it's also a very good perk, with items being really strong at the moment. It comes in extremely handy. Its original 1.7.0 state was pretty bad, simply causing an item to drop from the survivor's grasp and lose 10% of its full charge. The yellow version of this also just made it drop, and didn't reduce any charges, which is strange. This was extremely weak, and would require you to hit someone 10 times to fully deplete the item, if they chose to retrieve it each time. In 4.1.0, it was altered in the right direction. When survivors are hit, they drop their item, and if it's not recovered in 90 seconds, it gets consumed by the entity. This was pretty good, as most of the time an item would get dropped, and if a chase was kept up, the survivor couldn't really retrieve it in that time, if they had gotten hooked right after too. Sometimes you'd even have to get a teammate to go grab it, to make sure it didn't fall to the void. You also now got an aura to show where the dropped item was, which was helpful for knowing the location the survivor may come back to. Finally, in 5.0.0, it was changed marginally, to deplete charges instead, simply. This is technically a buff, with the item having its charges eaten away whilst it's on the ground, meaning if it is retrieved, it will be depleted. The only downside here is that perks like Built to Last can come into play and replenish the charges. This perk has also weirdly seen some gained power from killers being added. For characters like Nemesis or Cenobite, this perk can come in really handy, forcing survivors to drop vaccines, or the box for example. Overall though, this perk has had such a turnaround from its original state, to what is now an annoying perk with genuinely great utility in removing powerful items from the game. We're Gonna Live Forever is a weird case, as its original iteration wasn't necessarily meant to be strong in gameplay, and was more of a utility blood point perk. For each protection hit you'd take, or save you'd get 50% extra BP for the trial, up to a total of 200%. It received a nerf in 1.7.0, reduced to 25% up to 100%. At this point the perk was still entirely BP related, and had no actual effect essentially in gameplay, which I would personally consider to be bad. At the end of the day, the perk literally does nothing. It received a minor nerf in 2.7.0, with it giving stacks only when safely saving teammates from hooks, on top of protection hits also of course, making it a little harder to get max stacks. For a long time it remained this way, being purely a utility perk, which in actual gameplay had little effect at all. It could even be a hindrance, as it would cause risky play, and an abundance of altruism, which could lead to death. In 4.3.0, it was reworked slightly, giving an actual effect of a 100% increase to healing survivors in the dying state. The requirements for gaining tokens were also widened, making it easier to reach the max for the BP. There was a brief period where this perk was incredibly strong, when paired with Soul Guard, allowing teams to essentially make it impossible for the killer to down them quick enough before they could revive. The issue was fixed however through a nerf to Soul Guard, and not to We're Gonna Live Forever, with it receiving a 30-second cooldown. In 6.1.0 it was buffed in gameplay once more, applying the endurance effect on those who were revived from the dying state, losing its activation when doing so. The BP part however was lost. Overall this is a weird journey for a perk, but it's a better perk now, from a perk that debatably did nothing to what is now a genuinely good perk with an actual function. And with BP being far more abundant now, it's not really needed anymore either. So even if you did consider it good before, it's essentially not needed anymore anyway. Alright, well that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and let me know if there's any perks you would add to this list that I didn't mention, as I'm sure there's some others worth mentioning. Thanks, and goodbye.